In his recent video, The Myth of the MGTOW Future, Matt Forney waxed grouchy as he slung mud MGTOW way. Before I address some of the points he raised, I want to suggest at least one reason why Matt, Davis, and others may want to stop hounding MGTOW. While I understand why the young PUAs, MRAs, antifeminists, and MGTOW would insult and attack each other, I'm surprised to see the more mature men throwing punches at MGTOW too. For one thing, I'm not the first to point out that the 5 stages of grieving loosely apply to how men deal with the feminist hate movement and hypergamy run amok. Also called the 5 stages of acceptance, these are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. The younger guys are more likely to be angry, which makes them very easy targets. And while many MGTOW appear to be millennials, I'm surprised by how most, if not all, of their detractors appear to be Gen-Xers. Now, I often enjoy listening to Aaron Clary taking pot shots at my generation. God knows the boomers screwed Gen X and deserve all the mud Aaron slings. But really, guys, you're not doing yourselves any favors by slinging mud at the millennials because your generation is no better than mine. And the millennials already have plenty of reasons to be pissed off at you, too. Not that all the MGTOWs are millennials. Turd, Flinging, Monkey, Sandman, Stardusk, and CS MGTOW, among others, are certainly Gen Xers, and I'm a boomer. But in our cases, the decision to go MGTOW was an intellectual one. But unlike the boomers and Gen Xers, millennials came of age under the cruel thumb of misandry and the feminists' war on men. So while many of us are no strangers to suffering, as Chapin pointed out in a recent video, those of us who do not hide behind a veil of anonymity but publicly oppose the androphobic thugs have endured much. But many of the millennial MGTOW were probably raised by feminists. Most, if not all of them, were educated in schools that hate masculinity, where they were taught to be ashamed of being male. And so their anger and pain dwarfs even the most deeply wounded men of our generations. Now here you are shaming them some more for reacting to that. Yes, well, that wouldn't be my first choice, but let's revisit a topic I covered in one of my earlier videos, in which Chapin has covered 2 Eric Hoffer's outstanding book, The True Believer. The True Believer is not about feminism or MGTOW or the men's movement, and yet it's everything about them. Eric Hoffer's The True Believer was published in 1951. It's a thin little book that in concise, plain English explains why people invest their identities into a mass movement, what it means to them, and then outlines the life cycle of mass movements from the academic scribblers to the tipping point to the backlash to the consolidation. Third wave feminism represents the consolidation, which feeds off the orthodoxy of the fanatics. In opposition to them, we have the academic scribblers, which includes most of the MRAs and antifeminists. It's the men of MGTOW, however, who will create the tipping point that will produce the backlash. So far, this backlash is fairly benign. A John Galt-style strike that hurts nobody but gives the feminists exactly what they say they want. Now to me, MGTOW like Stardusk, Turd, Flinging, Monkey, CS MGTOW, and Sandman sound eminently reasonable. I don't agree with everything they say, but do we have to? Of all the vloggers I listen to, I probably agree with Chapin and Turd, Flinging, Monkey the most. Now, a few days ago, Turd, Flinging, Monkey almost sounded like a male feminist as he spoke about using technology to lift women beyond the limitations of their biology. Anybody who is familiar with his work knows TFM is anything but a male feminist. But because he has transcended the limitations of the blue pill mentality and applies male logic and intelligence to the issues, he transcends dogma. CS MGTOW is solidly identified as MGTOW, and yet he can address MRA issues as competently as anybody. Chapin is an outspoken and articulate anti-feminist, yet he absolutely is and describes himself as a man going his own way. These and others are the men who have matured into the acceptance stage and truly transcend the labels. They are like Jedi Knights. They're divergent, as the word is used in the movie series by the same name, which reminds me, while watching the movie Insurgent the other day, it struck me that in the series, a divergent is a woman who possesses all the potentials of a man. So by the standards of that series, most men are already divergent. Women are hypergamous. Men are polygynous. That's the nature of the beast. Around the planet, humans developed the institution of marriage to rein in the excesses of both, not because they consciously set out to optimize the survival of the human species, but because that's what worked. Monogamous marriage brings the hypergamous nature of women and the polygynous nature of men into a more or less balanced dynamic tension, and this is what we call patriarchy. Unfettered hypergamy is universally bad. It always leads to poverty. Unfettered polygyny is usually bad. If there are approximately equal numbers of women and men, then polygyny forces too many men to remain single. This produces a lot of angry men, which leads to social instability. When is polygyny a good thing? When there are a lot more women than men, but that doesn't happen not very often. So for most of recorded history, monogamous marriage has worked best. What about polyandry and polyamory? There lies the province of science fiction. Writers have speculated about that, but, as Robert Heinlein did in his classic The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, but the few real-life examples we have exist under primitive conditions, which suggest that, along with unfettered hypergamy, they exemplify the family values of the Stone Age. And while we may not be plodding back to the Stone Age, at least not yet, the Stone Age family values of present-day hypergamy are destroying our prosperity. And prosperity is a key term here. In her excellent book, Sex and History, Ray Tannehill noted that prosperity alleviates the constraints that bind societies to monogamy, giving way to the hedonism and hypergamy that drag societies down into poverty. It's a cycle. And this is something that Matt and others seem to ignore when they hammer on things like the flagging economy and the apparent dearth of technological innovations. Cultural and economic cycles reflect human nature. In economics, Nikolai Kondratiev observed this almost 100 years ago and broke it down into 4 seasons. In the spring, human innovation is in full bloom. New innovations emerge, economies grow, optimism is in the air. Come the summer, society enjoys the prosperity their industry produced. In the autumn, hypergamy is on the rise, and as hedonism becomes more acceptable, innovations fall off as men work less to pursue the pleasures of their flesh more. But then comes the winter, and the economy collapses into poverty. It's this poverty that motivates many men, and a few women, to create the innovations and industries that will lead to the next economic spring. If you were to guess that we are now in a Kondratiev winter, you'd be correct. The current Kondratiev cycle, or K-wave, began in 1949, and we're nearing the end of this cycle. But cycle theories continue to be refined. Enter Martin Armstrong of Princeton Economics. Armstrong says he has spent decades accumulating a massive database of historical economic data, which has revealed what he calls the economic confidence model. Based on this, almost 30 years ago, he forecast that October 1st, 2015 would mark the beginning of a sovereign debt crisis. So here we are. What will it bring? Armstrong's not sure. It could be a Mad Max scenario, but that would be rather extreme. We'll probably have a major war. As others have written, war is the health of the state. Students of history will note that seldom in war do the wealthy and elite suffer. According to Armstrong, the war cycle will peak in 2017. These are the mighty cycles in whose grips we struggle. Ignoring these, Matt railed against the MGTOW for the optimism some express regarding technological innovations. He also lauded MS-DOS and grumbled about Windows. Well, I worked at Microsoft from 1988 through 1991, the very time when Windows was added to MS-DOS. DOS was still sold as the operating system, while Windows was marketed as the operating environment. But MS-DOS was never a disk operating system. It was a disk testing system that was developed by Seattle Software and bought by Microsoft to sell to IBM as an operating system. Just as Microsoft did not invent MS-DOS, they did not invent Windows either. Windows came from the same source as Apple's operating system, Xerox. In the early 1990s, the best operating system for personal computers was Linux. The problem with Linux has always been that you almost have to be a computer programmer to use it. The next best operating system in the early 1990s was called OS/2 Warp, which was developed by IBM. I have a copy of OS/2 Warp, and I ran it on my 386 for a while. Steve Ballmer mocked Warp, but it was actually superior to Windows 3 and Windows NT. For that matter, it wasn't until Windows XP that Microsoft really caught up with Warp. Windows 7 is much better than both, and I don't understand why Matt seems to be having so much trouble with it, but I might be tempted to migrate to Windows 10, but I don't want to get caught in Microsoft's annual subscription trap, where you have to pay them every year to continue using applications that are loaded with features you don't want just to keep using the same features from 20 years ago. That's why on my new PC I downloaded and installed OpenOffice for free. As for new technologies, the major leaps forward are incremental until several of them come together on the day that, as James Burke put it, the universe changed. This has always been true. The first airplane flew some 400 years after Da Vinci drew his first sketch of a rudimentary helicopter. Before the Wright brothers could fly, James Watt had to invent the steam engine, which led to the invention of the internal combustion engine that would eventually power the flight at Kitty Hawk. So today we have a multitude of incremental advances that are leading toward an efflorescence of technological leaps that will come together in a series of days upon which the universe will change. Some I've already mentioned, like Andrea Rossi's ECAT and hot cat reactors, often referred to as cold fusion, and sometimes called by those in the know as LENR, which is short for low energy nuclear reactions. The physics are still not fully understood. What is known and has been demonstrated to be true is that for a small amount of energy input, a bit of nickel, a pinch of lithium, and a small amount of hydrogen gas together produce an enormous amount of energy output that can be controlled. Rossi reports that the first commercial units may be on the market as soon as March of next year. Meanwhile, Richard Weir has been making incremental progress toward the production of an ultracapacitor that will make a giant leap forward in energy storage. Additive manufacturing is another major industry that is still in its infancy. Generally referred to as 3D printing, this will localize manufacturing. While some things will still require large-scale industrial plants, many things will move out of the factories and into your garage. Instead of going to the store to buy shoes made in China, you'll download the design, load the required toner into your printer, and produce your own. This will eliminate most smokestack industries. That's big. Another giant leap forward is actually a big step back. One of the secrets of indigenous American agriculture that Europeans and Asians failed to grasp had to do with massive sustainable production. No irrigation, no plowing and planting, just generation after generation of abundant crops. But now the secret is out, and in some farming communities, these practices are being put to use. The result is no plowing, no irrigation, no fertilizer, higher yields at a lower cost, and they're certifiably organic too. Google no-till farming to learn more. Another old but new technology is in housing construction. Thanks to the efforts of the monolithic Dome Institute, dome homes are gradually getting more attention. Dome homes cost about the same to build as stick frame houses, but they're far more energy efficient, And they're fireproof, stormproof, tornado-proof, earthquake-resistant, can be made flood-proof, and they're rated to last at least 500 years. And like the Hobbit houses, they're kind of cool too. Something fun is the RF resonant cavity thruster, also called the EM drive. Sometimes the press calls it the impossible drive. Forget the premature report from NASA. More recent tests in Germany and England confirm that it appears to be legitimate. There's your flying car, Matt. No rocket fuel, just electricity to power the thrusters. If this proves out, vehicles will be able to drift up and out into space at a comfortable rate of acceleration like 1.1 gravities, making a trip to the moon in a matter of hours and to the planets in a matter of days. Now, one of the areas of futuristic developments that has attracted the ire of some of the MRAs and neo-masculinists is IT. Yes, information technology. Biology began turning into an information technology the day the Human Genome Project was completed. That makes things like regenerative medicine subject to the law of exponential progress. Biotime is creating a platform for growing replacement organs using pluripotent stem cells made out of your own fat and your own blood. Nanoviricides is working through the FDA process to produce cures for viruses, all of them, starting with HIV, influenza. Actually, influenza is the furthest along the pipeline. Then there's dengue fever and HIV, herpes, a whole bunch of them. Other areas that are very exciting include graphene, a material made from sheets of graphite, one molecule thick, that are incredibly strong and promise all kinds of cool things, like computer screens that can be rolled like a scroll or folded like paper and carried in your back pocket, or an invisibility cloak, or absolutely bulletproof shield. Similar to graphene, phosphorine is showing superior qualities to silicon for computer chips. In between now and then, a few weeks ago, Intel and Micron Technology announced 3D crosspoint memory chips that are about 1,000 times faster than current memory chips. These are coming to the market now. Other breakthroughs include virtual agents, which are already coming to market. IPsoft's Amelia is able to fool people into thinking they're talking to a human more than 80% of the time. Soon, you'll be able to call customer service, instantly connect, get all your questions answered and your issues resolved without a long delay or speaking to someone with an accent so heavy you can barely understand them. Advances like these are the product of IT's exponential progress, and they're gathering momentum like an avalanche thundering down a mountain. So while we are literally entering the phase transition that Martin Armstrong has been warning about for almost 30 years, and that he believes will be a turbulent time of war marked by social unrest and political change, on the other side, we should expect to emerge into a world that will be very different from the one in which we live today. In between now and then, we may experience a time of widespread poverty, but as I pointed out many years ago, and as others have since repeated, the programs that currently substitute for men in marriage may collapse for want of funding. Should that happen, the West will once again rein in the unfettered hypergamy to bring it back into balance with men's polygynous nature. But none of these things will happen because of anybody berating MGTOW, nor because anybody berates the MRAs, PUAs, TradCons, Antifeminists, and neo-masculinists. Will we find monogamous marriage on the other side? For some people, yes, certainly. But is that the only option? One of my great-grandmothers was born into a commune, for that is essentially what American Indian villages were, but her parents were married. Marriage has been a human institution for at least 7,000 years. Gynocentric extremism is, as Daniel Amnius pointed out in The Garbage Generation, the family values of the Stone Age. But the nuclear family is only one model that has been demonstrated by history to work. Extended families were the norm for thousands of years. In these, parents did little of the actual parenting. Most of that was left to the village elders and the extended family. but even these were patriarchal. Now, some criticize Matt and claim that, like Roosh, he's just hustling to make money. Well, look, 20 years ago, I was one of the guys at the top. My Backlash.com website was, for about 5 years, the epicenter of the men's rights movement. But we couldn't sustain it. Oh, the website still exists, and I still update it every week, but we couldn't continue at the level that we were because we couldn't come up with a way to make money. And you need money to support efforts like this. So I see nothing wrong with Roosh, Matt, and others looking for and finding ways to make money doing this. In my Origins of the Men's Rights Movement video, I read my article about how Richard Doyle started the men's rights movement. Today, we have Davis Aurini doing a video in which he relates how he and another guy started MGTOW with their MGTOW manifesto. So they own it, and MGTOW today get it all wrong. They didn't say they own it, but that was implied. I read their manifesto and I thought it was good. But does that mean they own MGTOW? Does that mean that they have the right to tell everybody else they're getting it wrong? Well, are they getting the men's rights movement wrong? Are they wrong about anti-feminism? Because, oh gosh, some 40, 50 years ago, Richard Doyle today would be saying that Aurini and the other MRAs are getting the men's rights movement all wrong. It belongs to him, and they have to follow his lead, do it his way, because he's the one who started it all. But the men's rights movement doesn't belong to Richard any more than MGTOW belongs to Aurini. I originated a lot of stuff that today is claimed by countless MRAs and even some MGTOW. Warren Farrell originated even more. And if anybody should get credit for the major narratives of the anti-feminists, MRAs, and even some of the PUAs, it's Warren. Yet Karen Strawn's videos get far more views than Warren's do. Regardless, neither Warren nor I claim ownership for what others have done with the themes we originated, because that's not how it works. We build on the past, and then we become the past. What others do with what we built belongs to them. Aurini can claim ownership for the part he played and for what he does today, but that's where it ends. And while all of you are squabbling, the feminists and social justice warriors are laughing at you. Meanwhile, Warren Farrell, Christina Hoff Sommers, and Kathy Young continue to produce content exposing and opposing the misandry. But look, I don't want this to sound like I'm just beating up on these guys. In a recent video, I don't remember if it was MGTOW Stalked and Hunted or one of his others, since I watch all of Chapin's Inferno videos, Bern Chapin reminded us that while most of you hide behind slides and pseudonyms, men like Matt and Davis are putting their livelihoods at risk by being public. Bern described it as dancing on the edge of poverty, and that's about right. Warren may not be impoverished, but 40-odd years ago he was well on his way to becoming rich until he took the red pill and stopped being a male feminist. Anybody who puts his name on the line and comes out to publicly expose and oppose misandry deserves our respect, and that includes Matt. So Matt, I hope you're more optimistic about the future now. I hope you understand that technology and the economy are going to get going again, that we have some tough times to go through before that. And I hope that we've lifted your spirits too. That's all for now. Check out the other videos, subscribe to the channel. For the Backlash at Backlash.com, my name is Rod Van Mecklin.